Magnus with another chess video for you. I always like to point out at the start of my videos that I'm no kind of chess expert. I'm just a regular guy trying to learn and improve at chess, and hopefully some of these videos will be helpful to other people along the way. So that said, today I was playing the black pieces, and I saw it as an opportunity to practice the Piet's defense once more. My opponent started by playing king's pawn lead, and I began my Piet's setup by moving my queen's pawn forward one square. He then took the center, which is pretty standard with the Piet's. The idea of the Piet's defense is to give the center up and challenge for it later on. So I started the second part of my Piet's setup, which is to fianchetto the king's bishop. And you do that by bringing out the knight first. He brought a knight out. I then created the space for my bishop to hop into. And he then made this pawn move, which made me think. He could have made this pawn move because he wants to prevent me from going to this square here. I could easily hop in there with a knight or a bishop. And often people like to make this move to h3 to prevent that. On the other hand, it could be a leverage move. He might be planning to move this pawn forward, and then we've possibly got a pawn storm on the way. But I decide to plough ahead with the plan, move my bishop into position, and he pushes a pawn in the center of the board, which I think is quite a good move because it cramps my space here. So I decide to challenge him straight away. He then brings a knight out. Again, at this point, I think he's planning to castle over here. There's a pawn exchange. I castle, and then he does indeed make this pawn move. So I'm anticipating a bit of trouble over on the left-hand side of the board here. I'm conscious of the need to bring out my minor pieces, so I bring out my knight. I don't know why he made this pawn move. I have no idea. I made this pawn move simply to create space for my bishop, and he then kicked my knight. Now at this point I noticed that his knight and rook are nicely lined up, so I'm able to just simply play the knight away. I chose this square because whilst it reveals this attack from my bishop to his knight and rook, it also blocks his pawn from coming further than h4 down the h-file. He does indeed make this pawn move, doesn't do anything about the situation over here, so I'm able to take his knight, and it's a fork of his king and rook. So he moves the bishop in order to get some compensation for his rook. Now I'm concerned about the congestion here. I need to get pieces out, so I'm looking to clear a bit of space with this pawn move. But he doesn't take it. He brings his queen over to defend it. So I take it anyway. But he doesn't take back. He brings his bishop out, creating a battery, and this is a checkmate threat. It's not checkmate on this square, of course, because of the knight, but I think it is indeed checkmate on this square. So obviously I need to do something about that. And I can see that I can block here with my knight, and I know that his knight can remove my knight. But then I've also got the pawn sitting here. So I make the knight move, and he does indeed take me, and I'm able to remove his knight with my pawn. He thinks a lot at this point, but decides not to take the pawn. And the reason, of course, is I'm sure he knows that were he to take the pawn here, his queen would be on this square, and I would just simply slide my rook across and pin his queen to his king, and thereby win his queen. So he doesn't make that move. Instead, he moves the queen away. I'll move my rook across to support my pawn in any case, and he challenges my rook with his bishop. I want to keep my rook on this file, so I simply move it forward. Then he castles, and I challenge his other bishop. Now I'm feeling quite good about this because I've got a nice obstacle here on this diagonal. He retreats his bishop, and I offer a bishop exchange here. Obviously I'm up in terms of material, so the more exchanges I can get at this point, the easier it's going to be for me to checkmate him. And so he decides not to accept the exchange. Instead, he challenges my rook again. So I need to move it back. Again, I want to keep it on this file. And he moves his bishop across behind his pawn. So obviously it's doing nothing there. Therefore, I'm anticipating a pawn push. And that would, of course, unleash his bishop onto my rook. So I stop that by simply moving my pawn forward. And then he moves his bishop away. So at this point, I decide that I'm quite happy to trade my knight for his bishop. I move my knight across to challenge his bishop, but also to get it closer to his king. And he feels threatened by this and makes a king move. And we exchange, and I bring my queen to X-ray his king. He then moves his other bishop across to get it into the game. Obviously over here behind his pawn it was doing nothing, so he moves it to get it into the game. And I push my pawn forward, and we have a revealed check. And at this moment he makes the fatal mistake of moving his pawn forward 2 squares. And of course I'm able to play en passant, taking his pawn, checking his king, and challenging his queen. So at that point, my opponent resigned, obviously losing the queen and very close to losing the game. So I was quite pleased with the game because it's the first game I've ever won with en passant. So I'm very pleased with that. I hope you enjoyed the game. See you next time.